The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Football fans, the time is now.
Give me a hell yeah!
For the football show you never knew you wanted. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Broken Helmet.
Coming to you live on tape on this Thursday, September 4th, 2025. It is the best show you have never heard of. It is the Broken Helmet. Rich Eggy here behind the wheel. And to get in touch with the show, you can reach us at brokenhelmetshow@gmail.com or at Broken Helmet Pod on both X and YouTube. So, the day has arrived. We are here. It is the beginning of the 2025 NFL. Wait a whole while. I mean, what? Super Bowl was now 7 months ago, and then you had to go through the period of darkness, and then the draft, and then we went into OTAs, and then rookie mini camps, and preseason, and here we are now with the first game of the NFL starting tonight in hours. Well, depending on when you are hearing this. For you, it might have already taken place. But for when I'm recording it right now, it is set for about 6-7 hours from right now. And then we've got another game tomorrow. Tomorrow's game being played in Brazil. Tonight's game, obviously, is the Eagles and Cowboys. While tomorrow, like I said, in Brazil, we will get to watch the Chiefs and the Chargers take place. So, I was all set. This is usually supposed to be the Let's Bet show, the wager show that my brother and I do once a week, where we go through all the games, we give you our picks, our survivor, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty standardized across podcasting and all content creation. Except, unfortunately, yesterday, there was legitimately, talk, Rich, a car crash. And if you lived in northern New Jersey, whether it was, I guess it went all the way to Passaic County, but I live in Bergen and Passaic County around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, all of a sudden, you just heard crickets. There was nothing going on because the internets were all shut down. And it went on for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It hit around 11:30, 12 o'clock, continued on until I ultimately, after calling both the Optimum, offshore center, and then I called their sales office because I figured if I wanted to talk to somebody in the States, I'll call the sales office. Nobody had any information as to what was going on. I get in my car, and I cruise down the highway down to the Optimum office that's right down the road. I go storming in, and I'm like, what's going on with the internet? Is it my house or not? Because they're saying there's an outage, but there's no information anywhere. And these people are looking at me like, you're pretty crazy, dude. And maybe I was, but I couldn't do any work yesterday. I had planned on doing our kickoff wager show last night with my brother, and there's just no update whatsoever. Go in the store, they don't have anything. They said, well, manager, yes, people have come in. They're asking about what's going on. The manager might have some information. He's talking to somebody about, I don't know. I thought it was about selling a phone, but it sounded like the two knew each other. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take my craziness back in the car and get the hell out of here. So I go in the car and I go to Twitter because I said maybe Twitter has something. Sure enough, go to Twitter. I see the top feed about Optimum from the day saying, 4 hours in Optimum still has no info as to what's going on. And I see there's a couple of comments below. So I dip into the comments and I said, somebody's got to know what the hell's going on, right? And sure enough, somebody in the comments goes, here it is. It's a video of a tractor trailer that had made a right at an intersection of this small little town and had ripped out basically all of the cable lines that went between these two telephone poles. And I guess it ripped out. I might have ripped out power, but definitely ripped out cable, the internet, which for some reason, I guess it's a hub, and it knocked out literally 2 counties. And I start looking around the picture, and I go, wait, that that kind of looks familiar to me. That intersection there, does that say Hohoke? Ah, oh shit, that's my town. That's literally like a 5-minute walk from my house. I just had never left the house. My kids didn't leave the house. My youngest son actually went to go get something to eat right by where this happened, but I guess he must have been there before it happened. Thank God. And sure enough, the tractor trailer that crashed into these lines was in the middle of my town, and there I was for about 6 hours pulling the hair out of my head trying to figure out why I didn't have internet. Had I just gotten out of the house and done something other than sit at a desk, I probably would have seen that. If I just went out to go get lunch, I would have seen that. But it wasn't meant to be. So as I digress, point is that I wasn't able to get my brother on the show. So today I will run down at least our season-long bets and then bets that were applicable for today's game and tomorrow's game. And then maybe I'll be able to get him on the horn on Saturday when we can do the actual wager show. If not, I'll do that solo. But in case I can get him, I'll save all of that stuff later. So this is not the wager show, but I'll give you a quick rundown. Everything is time-coded, so you can skip around and go. Usually, this is a 4-down designed show. 4th down ends up being our wagers, so you can just click to that if all you want to hear is what we bet on. And if you don't want to listen to us, just spit into the microphone. And that's fine. Today, I'll do the same. I'll time code what I'm doing here. Probably most likely do the win totals for the NFC because I had done the AFC and I didn't get to do the NFC. I want to do that early in the week. It was my wife's birthday this week. Happy birthday belated to my wife, even though I already celebrated with her, so that's kind of stupid. But wasn't able to get on, but I will do the win totals for the NFC to match up with the AFC win totals, which were in show 25-11. And then after that, go into season-long bets, then do the 2 games themselves and any kind of bet that was related to those. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We will do the win totals for the NFC. First, like I said, I had done the AFC. Just to rip through the NFC here, I had the heavy end, the good teams, I had too heavy. And the bad teams, I had, too little. So ultimately, I'll just give the teams that I had whose win totals high or low ended up being in some kind of significant range that you might be able to generate a little bit of odds by, instead of going just the win total over under, actually picking the over under for the actual number itself, right? So Eagles I had at 14, Rams at 13, 49ers at 13, Commanders at 12, Seahawks at 11. Those were the high teams that there might be some kind of profit to be had or a little bit of juice where you could look for the over-unders. The highest over-under for each of these, so, for example, Philadelphia I had at 14. If you wanted to go to over 13.5 wins on FanDuel, which is what we use historically for our game lines and for our odds, you could get the over 13.5 for 360. If you thought that the Eagles could win 14 games. It's a lot. It's heavy. I know. They had a little bit of turnover in the defense, but again, you go through and I created the Claude app, which I had posted to my Twitter feed, X feed, earlier a couple of weeks ago. Had Claude made it up, and it basically was a full 32-team over-under tracker. And you could just put it through, and it would feed in. It's a little bit late now, right? We're starting the season. I had plugged it earlier. But when I went through these schedules and put them all through, the Eagles, they were super high. I do like the team a lot. I know there's a little bit of questions in the secondary. However, for the schedule that I ran through, I had them at 14. So if you went 13.5 over, it was at 360. The Rams might have been a better bet, but now with all the questions about the Rams and the quarterback position, I had them at 13. So over 12.5 was 440, which was a big ringer. And I'm getting distracted here as I'm looking up at my TV, which is in front of me. So if you ever see me, if you're ever watching the video portion of this, and you see me look up, and it looks like I'm staring into space, I have a TV in front of me in my little home studio here, and I'm watching Pat McAfee as they brought out Mike McCarthy to talk about the Cowboys-Eagles game. Mike McCarthy might really go down as one of the most odd coaches I've ever. I mean, he's been around forever. Did have success, at least in Green Bay. Got blown out the door and just trampled on the way out. Gets picked up off the scrap heap by Jerry. Inserted in Cowboys, and he wasn't great, but he wasn't overly terrible. But like a personality, he was not. I mean, I guess he's not as dry as per se a Belichick, but just to see this guy continually get coaching jobs and then on the camera. Well, it's funny that he's on the camera here because he's off-centered. So he'd be like me all the way to the side here as they're talking to him. It's like, camera guy. Well, it's not really him, right? It's Mike. It's like, Mike, get on camera. You can see yourself, right? No, they're moving it right now. So anyway, but like I said, the Rams I had at 13 games, so over 12.5, got 440. 49ers at 13 was 280. Commanders at 12 was 270, and the Seahawks at their over at 11-6 were 360. Seahawks, I got to revisit that because I'm not super big on that team, and to get them up there to 11 wins, again, I look at it and I question my own picking, my win-loss picking. So on the low end, I had the Vikings, I had way low. Same thing with basically the NFC North, only because I think all four of those teams are just going to beat each other up. So a lot of splits between all four. And I'm probably discrediting the Lions. A lot of people still think that, they're going to be fantastic. I'm not so sure. And the Vikings, people have them winning the division, and I have them at 6-11. So a definite disconnect between me and the overall public. Again, if I had to redo this, I guess maybe as I went through the schedule, I would discount them a little bit or credit them a little bit more than I did because I have a heavy discount. But anyway, the under for them ended up being 340, right? I had the Cardinals at 6-11, the Giants at 4-13, and then the Panthers at 3-14, and the Saints at 1 measly win. So the Saints at 1, their under, which was under 2.5, ends up being plus 800. For the Vikings, it was plus 340. Cardinals was plus 300. The Giants were pretty even at 145. So that's just what the Vegas thought anyway. And then the Panthers was plus 600, and then the Saints at plus 800. So of all of those, obviously the Panthers and the Saints, who I'm just giving little to zero credit, if you did like their unders, their win totals, then there was money to be had there. It's tough to imagine an NFL team in 2025 having one win, but with the Saints, with that quarterback situation, minus somebody rising to the call, I really don't know how they're going to get a ton of wins. I just can't see it. One I know is a very small number. And if we had time, I'd go through the schedule to show you how I graded it. But, the purpose here was just to go through those win totals and show which ones maybe you wanted to, throw a little cash on, sprinkle, as they say, as everybody says now, which when I first started listening to gambling podcasts, maybe 2013, 2014, whatever was around there. I think Gil Alexander might have been the first one I listened to, but I don't really remember when that was. Maybe 2013, 2014 is a little early, but I think it was Gil Alexander's that I first heard the term sprinkle, and then now it is used everywhere. Everywhere, everybody's using sprinkle. So you might want to sprinkle a couple on those. The Saints, look, it looks great at plus 800, but it's hard to believe that they would get a one win and one win only. But again, those were the over-unders for the NFC teams in their win totals. So enough of that. Season-long bets. Let's get into those because that's what this show originally was going to be. It was going to be its own standalone show for our season-long bets. Again, to refresh what we end up doing here for our gambling shows, we start with a fantasy bankroll of $10,000, and then me and my brother end up betting into that both on the season and then each week. At the end of the season, we see who is better, and we see how we stack up against the pros. We do not use units. We just use straight dollars because that's how you bet. There's nothing wrong with units. I think I explained this in one of the other shows, but we just use dollar figures because it makes it easier to digest from a gambler aspect because that's how people bet. Now, the figure of 10,000 is completely arbitrary. It could be 100,000, it could be 500,000, it could be 10 million, it could be a million. What does it matter? We did 10,000 because I felt like it was a nice spot to put in there for small gamblers to big gamblers, and you could extrapolate it to whatever bankroll you might have. But we were doing, I think we started, maybe when we started doing this years ago, we might have done 1,000. And then that made the bet units really small. And so then I think we brought it up to 10,000 either last year or the year before. But regardless, we always do a season-long betting show where we get into what we think, in terms of the awards and player milestones, and we try to get a little invested toward the end of the season. Last year, I think the only thing I really hit was, and I didn't even do these this year, was division winners. I think I parlayed a couple of them. I don't know if my brother, I don't remember offhand. Again, if he was on the show, he could speak to it better than I could, what my brother had. But I don't think it was all that much. This year, we both spend about, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 of our 10,000 involved in this. My brother this year ended up going with about 1,000 on his. I ended up doing a little bit more. I'm at around 1,500. His list of season-long bets is smaller than mine, so I will just end up going with his first. So right off the bat, I will go with Chris. He did divisional winners, and he did the Bengals and the Bears both for $100. So Cincinnati ended up pulling back 300 for the 100, and Chicago ended up pulling back 600 for the 100. I like Chicago not because I like the team. I think they're a team with potential. So if you were to take any flyers on a team, they would be a good one because you really don't know what you're going to get with them. They have offensive weaponry that Ben Johnson in his first year there could turn into, a significant win total. It's a tough division. They're going to be beating each other up all year long. And it's not unheard of to see a team that has talent there, both sides of the ball, get a new coach, especially this being Ben Johnson, the offensive mind that we've all been waiting for to get a head coaching job, now has one, that he could step in there and turn the team around. And so they're kind of the wild card in a lot of things. They're a wild card in fantasy, a wild card with betting. I think we'll know more, obviously, after we get done with the unofficial preseason, weeks 1 through 4. But for now, I think Chicago for futures bet is an intriguing bet. I did not end up taking them in this regard, but I think the division for Chicago is probably something that I should have taken a bite on. Maybe I'll end up doing that in my personal account. But again, 100 to pull back 600. Conference titles. My brother has Cincinnati in the AFC, Detroit in the NFC. Cincinnati ends up, he put 100 on that to pull back 1,100. And then he put 100 on Detroit to pull back 650. Not a fan of Detroit. I would not go that way. I think it's going to be a tough road for them losing. I was not an Aaron Glenn fan. I was a Ben Johnson fan. So I don't think that you lose all that much with Glenn. I think you can replace him, but just the overall factor of losing so many components to a ball club, I think it's tough to replicate, the success of years past where they almost ended up, they had a strong chance to go, to the Super Bowl. They got cut short, before the NFC title game. But here for 2025, I don't know if, they're going to replicate it. Cincinnati is interesting because they have a ton of offense. The defense is a big question mark, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. Maybe they turn it around. They drafted Stewart to try to add to the defensive pass rush. They got Hendrickson in there, back in there. And so maybe they could muster something, enough of a defense to make another run, to the Super Bowl where they ended up losing years back to the Rams. So that one, I think it's probably a tougher go because I think the AFC is stacked. But I like that bet here more than Detroit. Super Bowl, he went with Buffalo, 100 to pull back, 600. And then he took Cincinnati. Obviously, he had them in the conference championship. He took Cincinnati for the Super Bowl as well, 100 to pull back, 2,200. MVP, he went with Burrow for 100 and Goff for 100. Burrow was 600 in return. Goff was 3,000. And then defensive player of the year, he went with Hutchinson, $100. I like that one because I ended up going with that as well. He put 100 back to pull 700, 100 in to pull 700 back. And then he went with TJ Watt. TJ Watt, he ended up pulling back. He put in 100 for 950 in return. And that was all he did. And that was $1,000 total for all of his season-long bets. I was a little more aggressive. So I have a ton, and I will just go through them one by one. I'll go with all of the awards because I have a bunch for all. MVP, I made 3 wagers. I did Lamar, Mahomes, and Saquon. Lamar and Mahomes, I put 50 on both of those. And then Saquon, I put 25. The thought with Saquon was he had a great year last year. He's probably got one more year of his prime here before he starts to hit his old peak and come down. I don't think that Jalen Hurts is going to dial up his offensive production. So I would imagine that you'd probably end up seeing more of the same as last year if the Eagles were to be successful again here in 2025. If that's the case, and Saquon has another monster season, right, then I could see him finally claiming a non-quarterback MVP. And I think the last 2 that did that were back-to-back years. It was Tomlinson and Alexander, early 2000s, right? Alexander was way early 2000s. So it must have been like mid-2000s, like 2005, 2006. You look it up. I have it written down somewhere else. But Barkley would be the first since them to claim an MVP as a non-quarterback. So I put those 3 in for the quarterbacks. Obviously, Barkley for $25 pulls back 1,500. Offensive player of the year. I took Chase because Chase had a monster year last year. So I figured I could definitely see that happening again. I put Bijan Robinson and then Jahmyr Gibbs. $50 for each of those. They all pull back between 400 and 650. Nothing as crazy as that Barkley one, but I wanted to get a little bit of activity in Offensive Player of the Year. Offensive Rookie of the Year, I have 4. I went with Hampton and Henderson, 2 out of the backfield. I went with Mbuka and Golden, 2 at wide receiver. Hampton and Henderson obviously have been talked about. Hampton goes into a great spot. Henderson has shown flashes of brilliance, barring it's only the preseason. But I thought that they were probably both worth it because, especially Henderson's odds pullback for the 50 invested net you back 700. So Hampton is a little iffier play because he's more of a favorite, but even the 50 pulls back 375. And Buka, look, Mike Evans gets hurt. even if Mike Evans doesn't get hurt, Baker throws the ball around a ton. And as he does so, you could see him getting plenty of stats and yardage so that it would put him in the argument for the offensive rookie of the year. And then Golden, of all of these, his 50 investment pulled back 1,100, which I really liked because Golden very well could become the number one wide receiver in Green Bay. If that is the case, then I would imagine he's going to get the ball thrown to him a ton. I know they ended up running the ball a lot last year, but Love was hurt out of the gate. This year, I know he just had his thumb fixed, but he's good to go going into the season. They did spend a decent draft pick here with Golden, so why would they not try to feature him in the offense if he can go, right? Mentioned in shows past again about how the modern NFL is way easier to transition from the college game, which is why you're seeing so much success from these college head quarterbacks as they transition in quickly. It used to be a couple of years on the bench. You had to learn the system, et cetera. Not as much anymore. Same thing with wide receivers. Wide receivers always had to come a 3-year ramp to get up to speed. Now you're seeing them enter into the league and produce right away. Same thing here with Mbuka and Golden. So, defensive player of the year. I had to take defensive player of the year. I had to take Parsons. Now with his back injury, it makes me a little skeptical, but I had already made the bet. I'm going to stick to it here. 50 on him. Hutchinson, like I had mentioned, my brother had it. I also took Hutchinson, 50 on him. And then I took Abdul Carter. I took Abdul Carter here just simply for the odds. His odds were, I put 25 in to pull out 1250. Is it practical? No. But you're looking at a rookie who is getting unbelievable praise out of both not only the beat reporters, but the actual players being interviewed about him, both on his own team and other teams. And he goes into a defensive front that is more or less stacked. So you're bringing back Sexy Dexy. You already have Burns, Thibodeau. There's been a couple other additions. You put Carter in there to just do his thing. And if he goes nuts in New York with the, LT there and him looking for LT's number and that whole thing, I could just see there being an outside chance of Carter getting a defensive player of the year. Again, it's $25 out of the bankroll, which isn't a lot. But the odds are there, and obviously you can make the narrative, or if you can't, I can, because I just did. So Carter there for the 25, and that was a defensive player of the year. Defensive rookie of the year, there was a little bit of value here. And I think because Carter is basically locked in as the number one. Now, I did not take Carter. The odds weren't worth it. I did take Carter in the sense that I have him as defensive player of the year, and if he goes nuts, that's how I'm going to cash in there. When I went defensive rookie of the year, I looked at people other than Carter, right? So I went with Walker. I went with Hunter. Now, Travis Hunter's a question mark because everybody's been talking about him being a wide receiver so far in the preseason, up until like a week or two ago. And I think it was Peter Prisco, who I first heard talking about it, mentioned that Travis Hunter was going to be featured on defense more. And I forget, I think Prisco heard it from somebody, and I forget who he referenced, but I just remember hearing out of Prisco's mouth first. And then all of a sudden you started hearing people that had drafted Hunter being like, oh, man, I wish I knew that before I drafted him in my fantasy, because if he's going to play defense, it's going to hurt his offensive point total, right? But for defensive rookie of the year, if he ends up playing corner and he becomes more of a shutdown, lockdown corner, along with the offense, there's an outside chance. So I put Hunter in there. I took Stewart from Cincinnati as well. Again, they drafted him to rush the quarterback. They put him with Hendrickson. If he goes sick, has a great year, definitely could see that happening. And then Malachi Starks, because you're putting Malachi in a pretty well-established defense that might not be what they were of years past, but still very solid. or in his second year there being the DC. And, that safety position could get a couple of interceptions, could get a couple sacks, however they use them. It would it would not be out of the realm of possibility to see Stark step in there and then get Defensive Rookie of the Year. So I put 50 on all of those, and the returns were pretty solid. Like I said, Walker was my first one. That was 475, down to Starks, who had the highest odds, and that pulled back 1,000. Comeback Player of the Year, I only took one. I took Chris Olave, and the mentality behind Chris Olave was, well, behind that pick, not behind him. I don't know what his mentality is. Was that he suffered his concussion last year, had that injury, missed out all of the season. Comes back here, granted he doesn't have a quarterback, but if he has a number one wide receiver point production, yardage production type of year, then I could see him getting comeback player of the year versus some of the other people that there were. I obviously I think Hutchinson was one. He broke his leg. I think Nick Chubb was above Olave here, but to me, Olave was a one, lost a year of his professional career due to concussions, comes back, blows up because he's got the opportunity, 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards, maybe even 850 to 900, right? 800 to 1,100 yards and a couple of touchdowns, I think would definitely put him in contention for the comeback player of the year. Protector of the year. I didn't even know what these were. I guess there's a lineman of the year. I've never followed this, and I don't even think I betted on it last year. But going through it, I only picked one. I picked Laramie Tunsil. He ends up moving teams. He ends up landing with Washington. And if he locks it down for that Commanders line and they have a fantastic year, Jaden Daniels benefits as a result, Laramie Tunsil easily would be worth $25. So I put 25 on Olave and Tunsil. Olave pulled back $13.75, and then Tunsil pulled back $6.25. Coach of the year, I only took two. I took Ben Johnson, and I put 50 on him. And then I took Raheem Morris, put 25 on him to get back $7.50. The argument for Raheem Morris is his second year in Atlanta. They have made the switch at quarterback, so now Penix is going to get the full training camp into the season with the entire offense. They look like they could do a little something. That NFC South there is a weaker division. It was the Buccaneers last year. I could see the Buccaneers falling back down to earth. Carolina isn't there. Saints aren't there. So all of a sudden, Atlanta comes through, has a great year, wins the division, and, looks good doing so. Raheem Morris shouldn't be that low on the odds for Coach of the Year. But he is, and you look at the odds, you'll see the Coaches of the Year are, who you would think. But I thought that Morris was discounted at where he was valued, so I took that at 25. Now going over into players, and we'll do, most yards for the season. Quarterback, Burrow, I took his passing yards for the season, 25, not a lot back, 100, but you're still getting 4-1. Interceptions for the year. I took Josh Allen. Josh Allen's interceptions historically fluctuate, but his highs are really high. And so they didn't really do anything with the wide receiver room this year. So you're still questioning, is Coleman going to be ready to take the next step? Is he the guy? Kincaid didn't blossom the way that they thought he was going to. What's the deal there? And without making any kind of improvements to that wide receiver room and without having, lockdown tight end that you thought, I could see, Allen forcing a little bit, getting his interception numbers back up there. And the return was great. $50 pulls you back 1,000. Over to wide receivers, I ended up taking 4 for most receiving yards for the season. I took Chase, Lamb, Collins, and Neighbors. I put 50 down on each of those. The returns range from Chase's 300 up to Collins's 550. Again, I would think that Chase has the best opportunity, but injury could happen. Injury could to Burrow could happen. I mean, there could be a lot of variables that allow these other three to get in there. And even without, we're talking about Lamb. The only one I didn't put in there of the notable names was Jefferson, only because I just had too much question about McCarthy. I guess I should have had questions about Neighbors' quarterback too. But Russ throws the ball downfield. Neighbors can go get it. And if they go to Dart, we saw Dart has a lot of potential against preseason. I don't know how that translates, but there's enough there that I thought Neighbors was a good play too. Collins actually was the largest odds of those, and I still like him going in there with C.J. Stroud and trying to hook up for big yardage on the season. Running back yards for the season, I took Bijan, Gentry, and Bucky Irvin. I put 50 on all of those. Basically, Robinson at 375 up to Gentry at 850 were his odds. And then the last things I did for season-long bets is I did my parlay mixes. I did a running back mix, and here's the mix. 1,250 plus yards on the season. I took Gentry and I took Bucky Irvin. Irvin had a great year last year. 1,250 is definitely in the realm of possibility. Meanwhile, Gentry is going to get the rock a ton because that's why they drafted in the first round. And we're talking about Pete Carroll, and all he likes to do is run the ball. And I could see the two of them both blown up, having solid years. And 1,250 isn't really blowing up. It's very manageable in the modern day of the NFL. On the other side, I ended up taking Bijan just for 1,000, just to get some extra odds in there. And then the last one, which is kind of what amplified the parlay odds, is I took Henderson. I took Henderson for over 1,000. So this is a 1,250, 1,000 parlay. The two players that I got with 1,250 are Gentry and Irvin. With 1,000 are Bijan and Henderson. And that ends up for a $25 investment, pulls back $1,757. And again, the reason that I like the season-long parlays is primarily because, like fantasy football, you're just trying to pick, ultimate results for these skill position players. And if you look at the numbers, what's 1,000 yards rushing nowadays? It's not a lot. And I know I don't want to discount it, but people do it all the time. So you throw Bijan in there and then Henderson. Henderson's the X factor. Why can't Henderson grab 1,000 yards? If he looks the way that he did in the preseason, and I know they have Stevenson still there, but, Vrabel is just going to end up going the Derrick Henry route if Henderson can prove to be that guy. And Stevenson can still get some looks, but if Henderson is better, he ends up getting the rock and he'll end up getting the yardage. And 1,000 is very easily achieved today. And if he's going to be getting odds that can boost the rest of that parlay up, so be it. So that was my running back parlay. I then did the same parlay, but I did just 1,000 across the board. Lowered the return quite a bit. 25 for 572. Again, those same four running backs, Gentry, Irvin, Bijan, and Henderson, all for over 1,000 yards, 25 for 572. Move over to receiving. I did receiving yards over 1,000, and I did DJ Moore. I did Williams, JSN, and Ridley. I did those four over 1,000, 25 to pull back 600. Then I changed that up a little bit. I took Williams and Ridley out, and then I ended up putting Garrett Wilson and Cortland Sutton in. So Williams, Ridley out, Wilson, Sutton in. Still did it with Moore and JSN, and that one got a little bit less, 25 for 566. I like Moore and JSN. I love JSN. I like Moore only because Moore was the horse in Carolina, and they brought him into Chicago. And last year wasn't great, but he is another like Saquon approaching the end of his peak, right? The end of his prime. He's probably past his prime now in his old peak era. But this is going to be his year to shine, if anything, right? Because Ben Johnson is the offensive guru, and we're going to light up other teams. And who's your number one receiver? It's DJ Moore. So Moore is, to me, I would think a lock for 1,000. I don't think he got 1,000 yards last year, but I really like him this year for that. And so put him with JSN, and then I rotated these other two wide receivers, and I made two different sets. So I did a mix parlay then between the two, and here's what I did. I did Neighbors, Genty, and Irvin all over 1,250 yards, rushing for Genty and Irvin, and receiving, obviously, for Neighbors. 25 there to pull in just under 600. And then I threw a curveball. Here. So what I did was I looked around and I'm like, what's a little ridiculous? Thinking the same mentality as picking Henderson and seeing his odds and being like, no, he can get 1,000. He can easily get 1,000. So I looked around and I said, oh, that looks a little interesting right there. Tyler Warren for 750 yards or over, or I think it's greater than 750 yards. What happens when I take Warren over 750 yards and put it with the Neighbors, Genty, and Irvin of 1,250? And that one for $25 ended up pulling in 2171. So just under $2,200 if Warren comes in. Again, it's a dice throw, right? It's a lottery ticket. But I can make the argument for it, and I was more than happy putting 25 down on that mixed parlay. And so those were all of my season-long bets. Like I said, I put a ton more in than Chris did. My total investment ended up being $1,500. So Chris comes down to $9,000 with his bankroll. I come down to $8,500, and that is where we will start the year. Speaking of starting the year, that brings us to our games. So without further ado, let's get into the two games that we got coming up, especially one now that is in, 30 minutes less than when we started this thing. So I guess we're looking now at about 6 hours here. 6 hours, we are going to see 2025's first NFL game. And that game is going to end up being an NFC East battle Thursday night at 8:20 on NBC between the Dallas Cowboys and the reigning Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles will end up flying into Dallas as now a huge favorite, the largest favorite of the week. They were tied with the Broncos. Broncos are hosting the Titans, and they were both 7.5. The Eagles, obviously, a road favorite, 7.5. But the Eagles got bumped up and are now at 8.5. I think that bump up took place maybe yesterday or the day before. They were originally at 7.5. Now they're up at 8.5. Looking at, and again, lines all brought to you by FanDuel. Well, not brought to you by, but courtesy of FanDuel. And all of the gambling stats that I will mention are all courtesy of the Action Network app. They've got a bunch of good podcasts, too, the Action Network does, that you can listen at. One was called The Favorites, but I think they changed the name of that to, I just saw it the other day, Square, Sharper Square, with Wilson, with the Hunter. Travis Hunter, no, not Travis Hunter. It's Simon Hunter, and the other guy who ends up, he's like the head of the Action Network, Chad Millman, and Simon Hunter on Sharper Square. But they have other podcasts as well, so tune in the Action Network app, and I pull these gambling stats from their app. So this Eagles-Cowboys game, obviously, Cowboys coming into it, new coach. The Eagles coming into it with the Lombardi Trophy in their hand. I could understand the 8.5 point spread. I just think it's heavy. I think 8.5 points for the first game of the season between division rivals with the Cowboys and an offense that is, look, historically they've been prolific. Last year was kind of a mess, but CeeDee Lamb is still there. They just brought in Pickens, so now they have a 1-2 punch. Dak Prescott goes back. The defense is, their players there. They obviously lost Parsons, but, so be it. I thought that the 7.5 was heavy, much less the 8.5 I thought was really heavy. When we go to the stats, it's a trifecta game. I am looking to be alone in this one because the sharps are on the Cowboys, or on the Eagles. 62% of the tickets are on the Eagles, and 61% of the money is on the Eagles. The only part that I did like when I was looking at this was, as I update these numbers as I go along during the week, I pulled these numbers just a couple of hours ago. I pulled them the day before because I was going to do the show with my brother, like I said. The Eagles were at a 70% sharehold of the money pool, and that has now dropped almost a full 10%. So to that degree, money is shifting over the other way, and that is actually where I took my bet. I ended up picking the Cowboys in this game. My brother, he ended up taking the Eagles. And we'll have to see how that plays out. The over-under for this one, 47.5. When I looked at what the stats were for the over-under, huge in terms of the under. I think they were both the tickets and the money were both close to 80%, 75 to 80%. We're going with the under in this game. I don't know. I kind of like the over, not the under, but I seem to be in. I'm not good with the over-unders. I never have been. Occasionally, there might be something I see that I like, but I tend to stay away from them only because I stick to the mentality that scoring is arbitrary. I know it's not, but it kind of is, right? Like a game could play out, strategies could change. The scoring, I really do think it could go either way. For this game, I would probably pick the over, but I am definitely in the minority because, like I said, the tickets and the money both liked the under at 47.5. So, again, I'm going to end up going with the Cowboys. My brother is going with the Eagles. Neither of us picked the total line, and then it's a trifecta game as the sharps, tickets, and the money were all on the Eagles. We'll flip over and go to the Friday night game. And the Friday night game is going to be on YouTube. 8 o'clock YouTube in Sao Paulo. If I said that correctly, I hope I did. I don't have a Latin accent, so I can't do it with the trill of the R. There's no R in there, but Sao Paulo in Brazil. Had a friend who dated a girl from Brazil. Her name was Helena Gentorno. Helena, if you're out there listening, hello, how are you? She was from Brazil. She was a dancer, and she was a pretty good bowler. Go figure. But she dated my buddy for a couple of years. She was a lot of fun and good laughs they had. And then ultimately, I think she moved down to Brazil and married somebody, I think, years back. I think through when Facebook first came up. And outside people had dropped the line. I think she ended up marrying somebody from Germany. Crazy travels for Helena across the United States. So anyway, why did I go down that route? Because the game's in Brazil. So not that anybody here listening would care. But the game is in Brazil, 8 o'clock, YouTube. So you got to figure out what bar to go to that's going to have that game, or one of your buddies or family friends or whatever that ends up having YouTube if you don't, which will end up being me because I end up having DirecTV. So I'll have to figure out how to watch this game, which will probably be pretty easy. But so the Chiefs are going to be on the road, but they're both on the road. So there's really no home team here. But according to the schedule, the Chiefs are the road favorite at -3 over the Chargers. Used to be the San Diego Superchargers, as Chris Berman used to say, but nowadays it's the Los Angeles Superchargers. So the Chiefs obviously lost that Super Bowl last year. They're coming back and playing early the first Friday. And I guess this Friday game, from what I understood and just read yesterday, I guess this Friday game happens because of a timing issue and the court case or whatever the establishment is, the anti-monopoly, whatever. It's not a case, but the understanding agreement as that the NFL doesn't fall into like the antitrust because they don't overlap with colleges and high schools, et cetera, et cetera. And these past 2 years, this Friday has fallen within the open window when they can have this game and not really risk any of those violations. But I guess next year it is going away. So I don't know when it comes back. I don't have a farmer's almanac here, but unfortunately, this Friday game will be going away going into 2026. But at least this Friday we have it, and the Chiefs are favored by 3. The Chiefs have the sharps on their side and a small lean on the tickets at 52%. But the money is on the Chargers. Now, the money is at 70% right now, but was at 80 yesterday. So, again, this number, like the money line from the Eagles, has come down. So even though the Chargers own a good portion of the money pool, the money has started sliding over toward the Chiefs. And that's actually where my brother and I both have our selections. We both went with the Chiefs and the -3. The over-under on this game is 45.5. Again, just like the Eagles-Cowboys game, huge percentage of both the tickets and the money pool are on the under here. I think, like the Eagles and the Cowboys, I would end up going with the over. I know the beginning of the season can be sloppy, but 45, you're looking at, 24, 28? 24, 28 gets you there. That's not really unheard of. In both games, that gets you there. So I think I would probably lean toward the over. It is not a pick by either me nor my brother, but we did both pick the Chiefs. So those are the 2 games that are going to take place tonight. Now we will end up getting into our actual wagers for those games. Well, actually, any wagers that are impacted by those games, I'll give them here. So we always do best bets, Survivor. We do super contests, so we do 5 picks against the spread, and then we do our wagers. I have basically my bets for the next 2 days. I have all of Chris's for the week, but I am just going to give what is impacted by either of the 2 games tonight or tomorrow. So for Chris, he picked Kansas City as his Survivor pick, so lock that one in for him. He also picked Kansas City as one of his 5 super contest picks. He took Kansas City and the -3. He has one bet that is tied in to the Philadelphia game, and that bet is as follows. It is a parlay, alt lines. He took Philadelphia -2.5. He took Kansas City -2.5. He took Buffalo -2.5 and Chicago -2.5. Now, Buffalo at the time that he made this was a underdog, or it wasn't the favorite by 1.5. That line, I think in the past 12 hours has shifted. And now Buffalo is now the dog. So he bet this, but these odds will actually go more in his favor given the fact that Baltimore now is the favorite in that game, which I was surprised at. I thought Baltimore would be. I'm on Baltimore. I don't have any of their picks here. I'm not going to put them in any, although, if I do pick Baltimore, I'll do that on either a show Friday or Saturday when I can get that in, and that'll be the technical Let's Bet wager show. So he took Philly -2.5, Kansas City -2.5, Buffalo -2.5, Chicago -2.5, 100 to bring back 1,000. And obviously, he'll get more on that now because, like I said, Buffalo has adjusted odds. As for me, I made a couple of bets, and then I have one super contest pick. Like him, I took Kansas City and the -3 as one of my 5 super contest picks. As for what I did with wagers, these were just a couple bets to get in some kind of activity on these Thursday, Friday games. Again, the 8.5 I think is a lot. The Kansas City Charger game is in Brazil, first weekend. I don't feel really confident about those games either. So you're talking about a big line game and then a game being played, not overseas, overseas, right? Well, not overseas, downseas, whatever. Another continent. They're playing on another continent. So I just put, like I said, a little sprinkle. Like everybody says, I gotta come up with my own terminology because I can't even use the sprinkle thing anymore because so many people have used it that when I used to say before, I used to not knock myself because I'm like, yeah, I don't know. You don't hear it that often. So a little ode to Gil Alexander or whoever the hell, made up the little sprinkle thing and, Vegas and et cetera, et cetera. And now it's just, I hear it everywhere. So now I'm just a hump like everybody else. So I put a little bit on the following. I did Dallas 8.5. Like I said, 8.5 is just a lot of points. Division game. Dallas has an offense. Philadelphia has a secondary they're trying to establish, if you will. So I just thought 8.5 was a lot. So I took Dallas at 8.5, and then I took Kansas City, but I took Kansas City and teased them down, not teased, but alt spread them down to -2.5. I took the half point, right? If it ends up being some kind of really close, freaky game in Sao Paulo, then I'll take Kansas City with just the field goal and not get burnt by taking the -2.5 and just adjust the odds, right? I think Kansas City is going to win this game pretty handily. I like Los Angeles for the future, but I think right now they'll probably still need to iron a couple of things out while Kansas City has basically just reloaded. They fixed up a little bit of their offensive line mess. And so I think they're just in a way better spot to take home the victory this weekend and probably by points. So I did Dallas plus 8.5, Kansas City -2.5, 50 for 158 coming back. Then I did Dallas with the 8.5, and then I put in some other individual prop bet parlay legs. I took CeeDee Lamb over 71.5 yards receiving, and I took Barkley over 10 yards receiving. So two receiving yards, CeeDee over 71.5, and then Barkley over 10. And that ended up for a $50 bet, pulling back 206. So again, my thought process here is Dallas stays in the game. CeeDee is going to get his looks throughout the game, testing that secondary that is being fixed. And then Barkley, whatever. Barkley gets so many touches. What's 10 yards? That could be a screen pass. One little screen pass. Could be 2 or 3 screen passes. Who knows? Out of the flat, across the middle of the field. 10 yards is not a lot. And so I like to throw that in there. So those 3 for 50 for 206 back. And then I did 2 Kansas City bets. I laddered the next 2. Basically what I did was I took Kansas -2.5. So again, I had them I had them in the parlay with Dallas. I took them and made them their own single bet. 50 for 84, not a lot. I'm just looking for them to cover, bring back the 84, $34 that I can apply toward these other investments here. But if they do go nuts like I think they will, I did Kansas City -5.5, and I did 50 for 112 there. If Kansas City ends up winning by 6.5, 7.5, et cetera, and I win them both, then I end up pulling back about 300 for or 200 for the $100 investment. I basically double the money, right? So that was the ideas that I had behind those. Just a little bit, just to have some activity here in the first couple of games this year. So that's it. Again, I will look to see if I can grab my brother, and if I can get him on the horn, then we'll do our regular Let's Bet show. If not, then what I'll end up doing is I'll just grab his picks, and then I'll do the show myself, solo. So you have to hear this voice over and over for another, period of, 50 minutes or so. So anyway, thank you for listening. All the best with your bets, your fantasy teams, your fanage, all that kind of stuff. If you do gamble, remember to bet responsibly. It's a really big issue, and it's something that everybody should acknowledge. And if you know anybody that is in need of help, 1-800-GAMBLER, the number's out there. So, but for all you Eagle Cowboy fans, have fun tonight. Same thing with the Chiefs Chargers, and I will talk to everybody else in a day or two.